Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Ahoy, Libration Nation! This week we are going under the sea, 20,000 leagues to be precise. That's right, our book this week is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, and I'm talking about it with Keely Blue. Keely is a library worker by day and a singer by night. She fronts the alternative indie band The Tea Lights. In her spare time, she loves walking, collecting records, and escaping into fictional worlds. I've known Keely for a few years, and when she said she wanted to talk about this classic story, I was curious about her connection with it, and let me tell you, she brought so much more than I could have imagined. I learned so much about her love of classic stories, specifically this one, and it was sincerely just such a joy to talk about this book. Our drink of choice was a Dark and Stormy. I hope you are able to enjoy one as you listen along with us. And also, we want to talk a little bit about who you are.
Yeah.
I was telling my daughter today I was having a singer come on the podcast, and she was like, that is so cool.
Yeah, that does sound very cool. I do love introducing myself. I'm like just casually dropping that as, I'm a singer. So yeah, so I'm Keely, or Blue in some spaces online, and I am a singer, a musician. I do a thing during the day where I work at a library, but the exciting part of my life is, not that library is not exciting, because I love books.
It can be wild.
Yes, we can definitely relate on that.
Yeah.
I think I would not work at a library if I didn't love books. I would not be here if I didn't love books. But yeah, my real passion is with music, and I am the singer of a band.
Okay.
And, yeah.
What's the name of your band?
The name of the band is The Tea Lights.
The Tea Lights. Very cool. And so you sing, what instruments do you play?
I play piano, and I also play ukulele.
Aww.
Which, yeah, more of a piano player, but yeah.
Yeah. How did you get into music?
I got into music, well, I've been singing, like, almost my whole life. Like, my parents always say, like, you were singing when you were in the crib, like, you were just humming songs, and they could come up, say, like, sing whatever nursery rhyme I knew, and I would just hum it for them. So I always loved singing, and then when I was like 13, I was watching American Idol, and I was like, I want to do that. Like, I could be on that show and be a pop star. And then then I don't know, but that made me, of course, I never did audition for American Idol, but I realized that was made me realize you could do it as a career. So I started pursuing it like more seriously after that.
Very cool. What kind of, I'm just curious, like, what kind of music do Tea Lights do? The Tea Lights.
Yeah. I would say it's always, like, difficult. I had this conversation just yesterday with a friend about genres and how, like, the words indie and alternative kind of don't mean anything. But that's, like, what I say when I describe the music. I'm like, it's, like, indie, alternative, folk, pop, like, whatever.
Okay.
It's hard to describe, but I write, like, pop structured songs, and then I consider myself just a singer-songwriter, and then use probably alternative, a standard band setup for the arrangement, like drums, piano, guitar, bass.
Well, very cool. I mean, like, someone like me who, I don't know a lot of, like, what goes into music, so I think it's really interesting to hear people, and they're explaining, like, they're passionate about it, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
So this week we're talking about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
So, yeah, I had asked you before if you had read it, and
I've gotten, like, halfway through, so I will tell you, and I don't want to take this from you, but I will say real quick, I feel like this is a story that's, like, so ingrained in our culture that I was talking to my husband about it, and I was like, have you read it? And he was like, I feel like I know everything about it, but I'm not sure if I've read it. So I have read at least halfway through the story, but I didn't quite read to the end, but I know the whole story.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely one of those books, like, I think there are so many scenes, like, particularly, like, a giant squid attack. Everyone knows that happens in this story.
Yeah.
And, like, everyone knows, like, that it's about a giant submarine traveling under the water.
Yes.
But there's just so much in it. The reason I had wanted to talk about it particularly, I was trying to think of what books I could talk about, and I was like, I should probably talk about one of the two books that I got a reference literally tattooed on me. So
yeah, okay, so you have a tattoo?
Yes, and I'm actually wearing a long sleeve, so I couldn't show it off. But yeah, so the tattoo is the motto of the Nautilus, which is mobilis in mobili, which means moving within the moving element.
Okay.
And the reason that refers to the submarine's movement through the water, which is the water is a moving element. Mm-hmm. And I thought that resonated with me, not only because I love the book, but I also thought of it as like a person's personal growth through life. Mm. Yeah, so I made it like a much deeper thing than it is, but it's a great, yeah. And I really liked that quote always.
So say it again, mobilis in...
mobilis in mobili.
Mobilis in mobili. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I guess that, I have another question, but before we get to it, you
yes.
also chose our drinks.
I did. Yeah, I was trying to remember. I knew there was like a particular nautical themed cocktail. I was like, what was that I heard about that I wanted to try? And it was a Dark and Stormy.
Yeah, so cheers.
Cheers. I really like this. Like, I really like ginger beer in general, and this is made with pretty much rum, ginger beer, and I think just a lime for garnish.
Yeah, you can put lime juice in it as well, but yeah, it's basically like, 1 part rum, dark rum, and then 3 parts ginger beer, and then they said you can put like lime juice in it or extra sugar or whatever, but anyway, I just did the classic. I think it's very good, but yeah, so we're having Dark and Stormies with this, so, and thank you for suggesting. I don't think I've ever had one of these ever.
Yeah, I hadn't had one either, but I'm like, I think it fits fits the theme, especially because I realized I need to make sure if it's the same in this translation, because there's actually like several different translations of this book, and this is the one I have is like the most popular one. I think it was... Okay, no, so it's not... I thought that the chapter was called The Maelstrom, but it's not. But anyway, one of the final chapters of the book, there's a huge storm, and they called the Maelstrom. And I'm like, well, a Dark and Stormy certainly sounds like fits with that.
Yeah, and you clearly know a lot about this story. And who were you when you first read it?
So I was just... I had to look at the inscription that my dad wrote in this. He gave me this book, and it says Merry Christmas 2008. So I was 12, I think. I was 12 years old and in middle school, and I don't know what it was about this book that I immediately was like, this is my favorite book at this time, but I really, really liked the story. Yeah.
And why did your dad give it to you?
I think, well, he always has been really, like, invested in getting us, like, to know the classics, I guess. He, especially, like, we would watch classic films at his house a whole lot, but also definitely classic literature. Like, I was also remembering a time that I was like, I want more for Christmas or my birthday or something. I'm like, I want more books about romance, because I was, like, a teenager and wanted more like YA romance, and he was like, you want romantic books, so I will give you like these classic like romances and stuff. And I was like, I don't really want to read like classics, but then I ended up liking it.
Yeah.
But
And also I think something interesting that I know about you, and you brought up your dad, but you are a triplet.
I am, yes. That is true.
Yes. So were your sisters also reading these classic books?
Yeah, well, I would say one of my sisters was never a huge reader, and I think she's an artist, and she's mostly been into like graphic novels and stuff. My other sibling has read, also pretty much grew up on the classics, and she, I remember particularly liking things like Treasure Island and Kidnapped, like Robert Louis Stevenson was one of her favorites, and yeah, I remember like she got into that much way before I did, I think, because she was like more of a kid reading this, and I think I was more like when I was maybe like 12 to being a teenager was when I started reading the classics more.
Well, and getting into the story a little bit, like, okay, very famous story, but what actually happens in 20,000 Leagues?
Yeah,
Under
what?
the sea.
So
But
what?
when I heard it's actually, the translation would actually be Under the Seas.
Yes, yeah, that's something that I feel like a total nerd about it, but I'm like, since I love the French language, and like that's one thing I hope to do eventually is to learn enough French that I can read it in the original French.
Oh, cool.
But there have been several translations of it. The most popular one was translated as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, whereas the original title was written like 20,000 sous les mers, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Sounds good to me.
but mer is MERS, so it's a plural, and it actually refers to not the like when you hear 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, you probably think of going like directly down, like downwards, but it's actually referring to a length of distance. So it was how far they traveled across the ocean.
Okay.
And yeah, so 20,000 Leagues Under the Seas is pretty much about, it opens with a sea monster, reports of a sea monster attack, or some kind of huge creature is attacking ships, or they believe it's some living creature. And the protagonist of the book is, well, I guess he's the one who narrates the story, but maybe the protagonist is someone else who I'll get into. But but yes, the narrator of the book is a Pierre Aronnax.
Yeah.
Yes. I've never been sure how to pronounce some of these characters' names, although I have watched like an adaptation of it before. But yeah, I think Aronnax is how you say it. And he is a marine biologist, and he is asked to come on board a ship that is going to try to hunt this creature down so he can provide his knowledge, and I guess just to learn more about it himself. So he takes his manservant Conseil, and then they also invite, these characters are French, and then, well, no, Conseil is from Belgium, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
But they both, obviously, like, they're French speakers, and they live in France, and then, which is where the author, Jules Verne, is from. They go on board this ship and invite a famous Canadian harpooner, Ned Land, comes on board with them. And the idea is just to track down whatever is causing these ships to be destroyed. And they end up finding it after like several months of traveling, and it have like a high-speed chase where this thing is, they're like trying to catch it, but it's too fast. It's just moves so fast, and they're like, what is this creature? Like, we've never seen something like that's so
they
big
think
and
it's a
makes such speed.
narwhal, right?
Yeah, it's something I need to like probably brush up on what the specifics exactly are, but yeah, they think it's got to be at least like a giant whale or something.
Yeah.
But turns out, so the thing finally attacks the ship after this whole long game of cat and mouse through the ocean, and then Aronnax and Conseil and Ned all end up overboard, and they finally like end up on this thing, and they realize this is metal beneath us. Like,
right.
This is not a living creature, and it turns out this is a giant submarine called the Nautilus. And yeah, and then they're taken on board.
You were saying Aronnax is, he is the narrator, but probably the main character, I'm guessing you would say, is Captain Nemo.
Yes.
Right?
I would say that for sure.
Yeah.
I think he's sort of an anti-hero, but I think that he's definitely the most memorable character from the book.
Yeah, so he's the most like we're saying, most memorable character from the book. So who is Captain Nemo? I think he's one to watch, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Captain Nemo is I love this character so much. Although I did say like he is an anti-hero, so he definitely makes like his terms clear when he comes to meet these three people who are on board, and he says that he's basically renounced the surface of the earth. Like he's decided for some unspecified reason to live in the water for the rest of his life on this huge machine that he's had built. And he has like a whole crew with him too. Like this is not just one man operating by himself. So there's a lot of people on board this ship as well who are in agreement with these beliefs of his. So he basically says like, now that you've seen this and you know what it exists, I can't ever have you return to the surface because you'll talk about it. So you are now my prisoners, but while you're on board, you will see like wonders unlike anything you've ever seen. And they pretty much accept that deal. Although, well, Aronnax and Conseil are happy about it. Like Aronnax is happy because he loves the ocean and studying the ocean. And he's like, this is a price that I'll pay. Like, I don't care if I'm a prisoner. It's worth it to me to learn all of this. Conseil is happy because he will do whatever his master says, basically.
Conseil, it was sort of like, I don't think this person would exist today. Like, this man was like, your life is more important than mine. I was,
Yes, I was thinking about that. I'm like, how to sum up Conseil? Like, the first moment in the book that you get an idea is like when they end up overboard. And Aronnax sees Conseil. He's like, oh, you fell overboard too. And he said, no, I just jumped in because you fell in, so I jumped after you. It's like he has, I was reading that, like, I reread it like a couple years ago, and I was thinking like, this guy has no mind of his own. Like,
yeah.
But I felt bad for him when I was reading those early chapters. But yeah, so I guess like, yeah, and then Ned is the one who's not happy about it.
Yeah.
But I guess back to who Nemo is, I love that he's just like, you get a good idea of like his character and his personality, but you never realize why he's doing a lot of the things that he does. Well, at least until towards the end, you realize some at least like some event that may have driven him to renounce humanity as a whole, but then you never get an idea, like you never know specifically like what it was that happened.
Yeah.
And it's just ambiguous, and I love that.
Yeah. And I, like I said, I haven't finished this book. You do find out, though, why. I mean, he is very angry, basically, towards humanity. And do you find out where that came from?
You actually you find out, well, you get an implication of I think the driving question for Aronnax anyway is he wonders what sort of culture he is from that, and like who exactly it is that he has such a vendetta against, and you never find that out specifically.
But yeah, I hope it's not a spoiler, because I got this from like just doing some research about it, but apparently, I don't know if it was the editor or the publisher that Verne was working with at the time. So Jules Verne wanted to make Captain Nemo Polish, and you're nodding, so do you know all this?
Yeah.
Okay. No, do you want to talk about it?
Sure. Yeah, okay. I'll talk about it. Yeah. So, yes, I think that his idea was to make him Polish, and the only thing about talking about it is I can't remember quite what the conflict was in Poland.
I don't remember the exact conflict, but it was between the Polish and the Russian people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was some kind of rebellion or revolution, I guess, and the Russians were oppressing the Polish people. And so his idea, like Jules Verne's idea originally, was to make Nemo Polish and have his, because of like everything that had happened in his country, he was against the Russians specifically and would only target like Russian ships. And I think his editor wanted that to be changed because they wanted the book to do well in Russian markets.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think at the time Russia was probably an ally of France, so they didn't want to upset any of that. So, and I don't know if it was in this book or it was like a later book. Have you read this other story about Captain Nemo?
Yes, so
Okay.
there is. So I've only read it once, and this was a long time ago. This was shortly after, because after I read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I needed to do a report in school on an author and like write about their biography and stuff. So I'm like, I'll do Jules Verne because I just read this book and I really loved it. And then while I was reading that biography, it said, Captain Nemo returns in the book The Mysterious Island. I'm like, what? I had no idea. So I had to get that book immediately, and thankfully my school library had it. But
Whoop, whoop, school library.
yeah.
You love that.
It was a really nice edition of the book, too. It had, like, these beautiful illustrations. But yeah, so The Mysterious Island actually does reveal... he's sort of a surprise character in it throughout. That book is about... It's another adventure story. It's about a group of people who are castaways on an island. And it's about, like, their survival story. But throughout the book, something is helping them, like, leaving them supplies and stuff. And they believe, like, there's another person on the island who just won't ever show himself. And... This is definitely a spoiler for this book, but I feel like that's the thing people know about this book.
People are tuning in for 20,000 Leagues. They're fine with a little spoiler for the second book.
Yes,
yeah,
the secret second book. Because you don't know until I think the climax of the book. They discover basically the remains of the Nautilus are on that island, and Captain Nemo has been living there with them, and he's been helping them in secret. And that's where you find out. He explains his life story, and he was changed. It was not Polish in this version, but I guess should I reveal that?
Oh, well, I mean, I saw it on, like, Wikipedia. So.
Oh, okay, yeah. So he's actually Indian in this version, and his grudge, I guess, is with the British Empire. And
there's a lot of grudges against them.
Yeah, that is very true.
So I guess probably the editor was like, who cares? Everybody hates the British.
Yeah.
Not Drinks in the Library. We love our British fans.
That's funny.
Yeah. So anyway, we do find out all about that, about Airnex. And I'm kind of, your dad got this for you, wanted you to read the classics. So also this book is one of, like, a very early, like, sci-fi.
Yes, I love that.
Okay, yeah. So do you read, like, sci-fi often, or?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I feel like I'm very picky with science fiction because I like stories that are more about characters. And so if there's, like, usually anything that's, like, more focused on the technology and not really about the characters, I'm not as interested in. But I love, like, Isaac Asimov is one of my favorites. Ursula Le Guin, like, a lot of those authors.
Yeah, and I do see another tattoo you have.
Yes.
So you have on your wrist, "Don't Panic." And where's that from? I know where it's from.
Yes,
You want to tell us?
that is from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is probably my favorite book series. That was my second choice. I was like, should I talk about 20,000 Leagues or should I talk about Hitchhiker's Guide? And I had read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea more recently than reread Hitchhiker's, so figured I would talk about that. But yeah, I love Douglas Adams as well. He's really a big favorite. That's one of Bill's favorite books. And nice.
So I have embroidered, he has it down in his office, a giant whale, and it says, "Don't panic." And what is it? Daisies or pansies are falling or something?
Yeah, petunias, I think.
Petunias, that's what it is. But I embroidered all of that. So he has that up in his office downstairs.
That's so good. I would love to see that happen.
Yeah, I'll show you when we're done. I'm very proud of it. Yeah, so you read a lot of sci-fi. Do you read classics a lot, or?
I used to. Like, I think more now I'm interested in, like, newer fiction and, like, seeing what authors are up and coming. But I think, like, in high school when I had to read a bunch of stuff for school, then I got more into it. Like, I read The Great Gatsby and I loved that. Then like 1984 was another one I really loved, that's like completely different. I feel like I'm like, Great Gatsby. Well, I mean, that's also not a very ends up being kind of a tragic story. Then 1984 is just like...
Sorry, I'm being a downer.
Yeah. 1984 is like the most hopeless story I've ever read. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I've read much else like in this sort of era. Mm-hmm. I did read like Dracula and Frankenstein I've read, and those are the first ones come to mind, these monster stories. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I love both of those, and like another good sea-themed one, Treasure Island, which I only read as an adult like a couple years ago, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is really well written. I love it. Yeah, classics.
And going back to 20,000 Leagues, so we know it's like an adventure story.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find like the vibe of it? Do you find is it funny? Is it scary? I don't know.
Yeah, I think the vibe is so many things, actually. It's hard to sum up almost, because there are definitely like there's more action-y parts for sure, like the famous like giant squid battle, and then there's several chapters that I love when they go to, I think, the South Pole, and they end up trapped under the ice there, and the suspense is just, it kills me every time I read it. And they have to figure out a way to get out before their air supply runs out. So there's all those, there's those exciting, like, suspenseful parts, and then there's more academic parts. There's so many chapters that because the main character is a marine biologist and he loves like fish, and Jules Verne clearly seemed to love studying. I actually was reading about that today when I was trying to think of like, what do I actually know about Jules Verne? Mm-hmm. And he loved researching. Apparently he would research just for fun. He wouldn't even like just specifically want to like, I'm going to write a book about this, so I got to research it. He would just like go to the library and read like as much as he could about like geography and science and all of that.
Yeah.
So it really shows in this book, because there are lots of parts that are just talking about like the kinds of fish that you see in certain parts of the ocean. And those parts can be so hard to get through unless you're very interested in like marine biology. So it's a very interesting mix of like these exciting parts and then like these dry paragraphs about like, here is what the fish that we saw today on our voyage. And then you also mentioned comedic, like, or if there are funny parts, because there are definitely funny parts in this book, and I love it. I've been saying I love it a lot, but I really love this book. And there's just like and I feel like this shows up in some of his other works as well. Like Around the World in 80 Days is like another really good Jules Verne book.
You've read that one too?
Yes.
Okay.
I would highly recommend that.
I love that.
And I think, that one, I was reading that after I reread 20,000 Leagues recently. And I was reading Around the World in 80 Days. And there were some parts of that were like, could have been in like a comedy sketch. Like, it was just such truly funny, like classic humor. And I'm like, this is great. This is great. And some of that is in 20,000 Leagues definitely as well.
Okay. Well, I think it's really cool that you've read so much of this author. And
yeah, I don't think I've read 20,000 Leagues. I've read Around the World in 80 Days. I've read The Mysterious Island, and then and then the only other one I've read is From the Earth to the Moon, which that one was very impressive, because you could tell, again, the research aspect was so, like, there are definitely some things in 20,000 Leagues that are not accurate today.
Yeah,
but
right.
From the Earth to the Moon, the thing that really impressed me was that it's basically about sending a rocket to the moon. And that itself was pretty forward-thinking, because obviously we have done that. But specifically, like, he calculated that the best part to launch a rocket from would be in Florida. And now, of course, there's like the whole space program at Cape Canaveral and everything. And I was so impressed when I read that. I'm like, well, it was true. He knew what he was talking about.
Wow, that is true. Yeah, and like, so I don't know if we said it, 20,000 Leagues was published, I think, 1870 or 1871. So, and then also it was originally published as a serial, correct? So I was telling somebody about reading it, and I was like, each chapter ends and like they're about to die.
Right.
Like almost every chapter ends like on a cliffhanger.
Yeah. Yeah. They make it very exciting for sure. And that actually, relates sort of to something that I wanted to talk about that I had done with this book, which was a project online, sort of like a online book club. It was, I think, like a couple years ago that I launched this, inspired by another project called Dracula Daily.
Okay.
And it was basically, someone who set up an email list to read a chapter of Dracula daily. And,
Okay.
but it followed basically the timeline of the book. So because that book is written in like a diary and like letter format. So everything was dated. So like on each specific date, they would send out like the chapter that corresponded to that. And I saw that and I thought like, I would love to do something like that with one of my favorite books. And the one that I really wanted to do was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Mm-hmm. And I think I mentioned that online, and one of my friends commented and said, like, I would love that to be real too. Like, if you want to do that, I would love to help you. So we ended up doing this project, which we called Voyage of the Nautilus. And we basically set up like an email list so everyone would receive a different chapter or section of the book on the date that it actually took place. Cool. So it felt like we were reading like a serial for sure. Like it felt, I mean, there was several of the chapters we ended up being on the same day. So it was a lot of reading to do. But then it's like it was cool because every now and then, like you would receive a chapter, like going day by day, it felt like you were experiencing the journey with the characters. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that because I was like, because that was the first time I had read a good translation of it. Because I was like, I want to make this like something you could read this version, which obviously this is the first version that I read and I loved it, but it's very inaccurate in certain parts. Mm-hmm. Like you just mentioned about a cliffhangers, and there's actually one, that's like the first thing I noticed when I was reading the new version, is at the end of chapter 4 in this translation that I have. It ends with sort of a question. Yeah, it basically said, "You have convinced me of one thing, sir, which is that if such animals do exist at the bottom of the seas, they must necessarily be as strong as you say. But if they do not exist, mine obstinate harpooner, how to explain the accident to the Scotia?" And then it just ends there, and I thought, oh, that's like an open-ended, like, how do you explain it? If these animals don't exist. And I thought that was the ending of the chapter for, like, a long time. Right. And then I read this other translation there's 2 different versions on the Project Gutenberg website. Okay. And this was, like, the full text of the book. And that chapter goes on for, like, at least 3 more paragraphs at the end.
Really?
And I was like, wow, like, this is very different. So once I saw that, I had to, like, compare both versions. Okay. And I'm like, we need to read, like, if I'm going to do this for this project, we need to read, like, the full version of the book. Right. So, yeah, that was such a cool experience because not only was I, like, reading this thing in real time with people who subscribe to the project, so seeing their comments was very fun, too. Right. But then it was also reading it, like, the entire thing for the first time because I had never realized how much was cut. And also, of course, word choices in translations can be very different.
I had seen a little bit in, like, researching this and learning more about it. I had seen that, like, the original translator, there's, like, a little shade. Oh, yeah. But because of what you're saying is, you know, things just, they take on a different meaning if you don't use the right words. So, anyway, that's very cool. And you just brought up Project Gutenberg. Yes. A little bit. Would you be interested in, like, talking to the listener about what that is? Because this is a library podcast. Of course. And that is a wonderful resource out there for everybody. So what is Project Gutenberg?
So, I mean, I feel like I'm going to describe it in such, like, crude terms because I've really only used it for, like, if I want to read something, and I don't find it at the library, but it's an online resource. It's a website where the text of classics that are in the public domain have been uploaded in full. And you can find so many different books on there.
Yeah.
And it's really great because, like I said, I have not been able to get some books at the library, and they are on that website.
Yeah.
And there's probably also a lot of books that have not been in print for a long time that you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
So it's a really great project.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think the public domain, I can't remember exactly how many years something has to be past publishing date to get into it. But I think it was like a big thing last year or the year before, because I think The Great Gatsby entered the public domain. And so it went on Project Gutenberg. So absolutely, it's just like a wonderful resource. I think you can get like the EPUB version, so you can read these on your Kindle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful for sure. It's trying to get the information out to the masses.
Yes, I'm down with that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's part of what I do at my day job for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I think you brought that up, and I'm really glad you did, because I want people to know about it. So, and then we haven't talked too much about who Jules Verne is. Yeah. I mean, is there anything that you know about him that you would like to share?
Well, like I said, I had to look him up earlier today because, I mean, the most recently I had been learning about him was way back in middle school when I did that project on him. So I hadn't really thought about what kind of a person had made these books that I enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you told us already he loved to study and learn a lot. And at that time, I mean, like you said, you have to go into the library and you have to go through the card catalog. Mm-hmm. Have access to a library. I mean, there's all, now we're so fortunate with all the different ways you can find information.
Yes.
But back then.
Oh, yeah. When I was reading that, I thought, I wonder what libraries looked like back then. He definitely spent, hours in libraries to produce the works that he did, and it really shows in, everything.
Yeah.
But I think I also read that he was, I guess his family was pushing him to study law, and he did study law for a long time, but then at a certain point, it was just the plight of the creative. It's you can't ignore your creative impulses, and he just decided if I have to choose between this lucrative profession and this thing that sparks my creativity, I have to pursue writing.
Right.
And that's something so many people can relate to.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people make those decisions to stay in something that's maybe lucrative, or they feel pressure from people in their lives to do, but you have to think about it at the end of your life when you come to it. You know, I mean, you're doing your singing, your creativity there. I mean, I think a lot about that is I don't want to get to the end of my life and think, but I could have done this one thing that was always in my heart, but I succumbed to what everybody wanted from me. So good for him.
Yeah. Good for Jules Verne.
Yeah, and good for us. I mean, he's left us with such a legacy of this story, which, like I was saying earlier, has such an impact on our culture. I mean, there's a movie. Did you ever go to Disney World and do the ride, the 20,000?
Oh, wow.
I did.
I think that was probably before my time.
Okay, that's right. I am a minute older than you are.
Right.
But I think it might be back. But yeah, I definitely rode on that.
Nice.
In the 90s.
Yeah. I don't think we went until I was 10 or 11.
Okay.
But yeah.
So that was a little bit later. But yeah, I did the ride, and then what is it? There's a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Captain Nemo is a character.
Yeah.
And the graphic novel series.
I've been interested in reading that. I'll have to read that at some point.
Yeah. You need to become the expert in all things 20,000 Leagues. So
yes.
So you'll just always know. You'll have read the graphic novels, everything. Just go to Keely.
Yes.
Is there anything else about this story we haven't hit?
I don't know. feel like we've really covered
A
most
lot.
of, yeah,
Yeah,
we've covered
yeah.
a lot.
Okay.
I mean, I love this book. I love the characters, love the yeah, I guess also just the fact that it's changed so much every time that I've read it has
Okay.
been really important. That's really important to me because like when I was 12 reading it for the first time, it was like a fun story, and then I think I probably read it at least again, or at least reread parts of it, because sometimes I'll just like pull out a book that I like and just read my favorite parts of it. Like, but I think I probably when I was a teenager, I would just read parts of it. But then I think the next time I read it in full was during college, and I thought like, wow, this is speaking to me like in a different way than it did, because I could see things like Nemo's characterization suddenly made more sense to me, I guess. Particularly like the oppression and that he faced, and his anger at the world from that was like much more compelling to me before. Like I hadn't thought about it too much when I was younger.
Yeah.
And just the way that he interacts with other people was fascinating. And then reading it like a couple of years ago when I did the project, I was really impressed by just like the characters' relationships and how it's just like they're just so like fun, genuinely fun characters to read about, and like you're like rooting for like Aronnax and Ned and Conseil, and like feeling all this empathy for Nemo as well, and just there's so much like I love characters, as I mentioned before. Like the characters of a story can be really good, but the characters are like what elevates the plot for me, and I was just so like invested in them this go around. And yeah, so it's been a good one to take away different things like from every time that I read it. So yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That was really beautiful.
Oh, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah. And I guess that brings me to, I always ask this at the very end. Who would you recommend this story?
Well, I think anyone who is interested in like the classics, especially ones that are this entrenched in like our pop culture knowledge.
Yeah.
But also, I genuinely think because I don't think I mentioned that I just adore the ocean and like being near the ocean.
Oh yeah,
and,
that's cool.
Yeah, and so if you're interested in like some nautical nonsense, I guess, just want to have like a good story like set, and it's a good travel story too. I mean, they go to so many places, literally like traverse 20,000 leagues. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, if you are interested, and especially if you're interested in what people back in like the 1800s, how they saw like different cultures, and then it's definitely a good resource for that.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, this has been sincerely a delight.
Oh, I'm glad.
And you have brought so much of yourself and your knowledge. And I mean, hearing about the project that you worked on with this story, and it's been really beautiful. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And then we get to enjoy our Dark and Stormy.
Yeah.
So, cheers. Thank you for spending some time with me and my guest for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.